Hey, Red Deerians, Mayor Ken with you once again on the post-council interview. And as is our habit, actually it's our joyous habit, we're in the downtown, the beautiful downtown of our city. And I'm here today, I'm joined today by my former colleague and good friend, Paul Harris. Paul, always a treat to be here. You've contributed so much into the downtown. You've just been a pillar, frankly. So it's a treat for us to be here. I don't know how it took us 22 months to get down here, but we're here.
There were several scheduling changes, but yes, we've been aiming it for 8 months, 10 months, something like that. But here you are.
And here we are. And it's a great day to be with you. So Paul, kick it off. What do we have today?
Well, we're asking you council questions. So that's always exciting, right?
For me,
some of these are a little dull, but you're going to make them exciting.
Well, dull is in the ear of the beholder, Paul, and that's what we'll do here.
Well, first we're going to talk about this extended producer responsibility report.
Yes.
So can you tell us about that and how that's going to play out with administration, what it is, and maybe how citizens might benefit and what they might need to know about it?
It's a curious report, and I say curious because when it was on council's agenda, it was adopted as an information item. So there was no resolution around it or whatever. So we adopted it for information on the consent agenda, which is just a way of saying that council didn't go into any detailed conversation on it because it's an emerging issue. As it relates to council directly, essentially what we can expect, and for folks there that maybe not even familiar with extended producer responsibility.
Like me.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
So it's a responsibility of packagers of material, of recyclable material, and so on. So typically, the responsibility now for producers and manufacturers of those kinds of items. Just think about it from the perspective of a box of chocolate chip cookies and the plastic and the packaging and so on that goes with that, and the challenge that has in municipalities to deal with it and so on. So an agreement has been struck with the industry in that PPR, I'll call it, which is packaging, plastics, and recycling. An agreement has been struck by the province, by the Alberta Recycling Association, to come to the table and start talking to municipalities as a partner in this. So we may be a partner with producers, or producers may take this on themselves as part of their own obligation of recycling and packaging and so forth. We'll know, and this issue will also come to Alberta municipalities for some floor discussion, but we'll know more about the Red Deer context, I would think, by January-ish of 24. The actual legislation comes in on April the 1st, 2025. So it's out there for now. It may have, and I stress the word may, it may have an impact on how we do waste management in the city, what role we have. Do we have a direct role? Do we have a contractual role? Or are we even in that particular space? So council, what is this, mid-September? So council, say by I'll say January, has asked administration now to come up with a more detailed report specifically geared to what can Red Deer expect. Yesterday was more of a heads up, this is coming, and so on. Over the next, say, 5 months, 6 months, we'll get into the details of what we can expect.
Okay. Can I ask another question about that?
Sure.
There's a national body, the Zero Waste Council, that's been actively trying to make changes across the country.
Sure.
Has that played a part in this particular
report?
report?
Much so. I appreciate your reference there. Extended producer responsibility has been an issue for probably, I would say, certainly 5 years. I would argue even 10 years, but certainly 5. Now it's an opportunity, I think, to gauge the impact on, again, municipalities in terms of how do we deal with it now. Provincially, there is a provincial umbrella over this, but now, of course, obviously municipalities are the order of government, quote, on the ground, if you will. And now we have to, really assess how it's going to affect us.
Okay, well, that's helpful, I think.
Thank you.
Next question for you is about the Permanent Supportive Housing Capital Grant Program.
Yes.
So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll ask a couple of questions.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. In 2019, Paul, the community came out with a report, and it was called the Homelessness and Housing Integrated Plan. And that report identified some significant gaps in housing. That's no shock.
We're seeing that right across the country.
Correct. We spoke in council about that yesterday, in terms of the national impact. So we were actually ahead of the curve as it related to finding these gaps and trying to address them through advocacy, through zoning, through things where we could, dip our oar, if you will, into the proverbial waters. So yesterday, in response to a council motion of a few months ago, administration came in and let us know that they had applied for $15 million in grant funding through the federal government's accelerator program, $6 million of which was designated to permanent supportive housing. So in our city alone, and this is a 2021 number, so arguably it's higher, but in our city alone, we need another 80 spaces for permanent supportive housing. And again, that number could be 10 low. But the bottom line is we need to move into that space. And if we get the $6 million, which we're quite optimistic we'll get, and I could comment, believe me, on that anyway. So we're optimistic about getting it in a realistic way. We'll either leverage that money with provincial plans. There's the province has come out with a $70 million matching program. And the feds would also come to the table from CMHC's perspective. And what I hope would be a 20-40-40 relationship. So in other words, 20%, 40%, 40%. It could be 20 municipally, 30 provincially, and 50 feds. But bottom line is, one of the things we learned in council yesterday is success is attained most readily if the municipal component is, it said 19%, but I'll say 20%. So if we're in the area of 20%, our chances of being able to fund one or more supportive housing projects are very good. So there's a lot at stake here. I'm extremely passionate about this issue. I expressed that yesterday at council. And I am looking, Red Deer, for a favorable response from the Government of Canada on this. And I look forward to celebrating that response.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good. And it is election season coming up, so you never know. Can you tell us, though, a little bit about...
I will say this, Paul. That homelessness, and you know this, homelessness and non-affordability of housing transcends politics.
Exactly.
It's a right
in
this country. Absolutely. It's a right in this country. We are, as a mid-sized city in this country, rightly asking for our fair, equitable share that's going into the major cities in this country, and more specifically, not even coming into the western part of our country. So we are asking, and we are strategically planning and presenting a plan that should be supported.
True. And Red Deer is in a unique position geographically in the province to really need that kind of support.
Totally, and thank you for bringing that up. You know, our location works so well in many areas, so well in tourism.
Works for us and against us, right?
Exactly, so well in logistics, so well in transportation, so well in education. When you think of RDP and our hospital system, as challenged as that is, but it also works, to challenge us from a an ability to provide services for people now that are struggling in some of our smaller centers that aren't equipped to have these kinds of services, and so they come into our city hoping to reestablish themselves, hoping to get some supports, hoping to get some help. And so yes, in our situation, we service, it can be argued, an area just as broad as we would from a hospital perspective or an educational perspective in a social context.
Yeah. Let me ask one more question, just so that we're clear for everybody that's listening. When you talk about permanent supportive housing, what is the demographic that grant is supposed to go after?
Thank you. It's a great question. Sometimes you get into the housing language and you forget that there's a challenge around these. So permanent supportive housing is and I'll try to sort of break this down. There is a scale of housing need that you would that you would manifest if you were in need of housing. If you are also mentally challenged, for example, you have a mental illness or you are addicted, for example, so you're quite challenged, not employable, etc., you typically would score on what's called a high acuity index. Permanent supportive housing is directed towards the highest acuity index. So these...
So not necessarily an age group.
No. Excellent point. You could be 20 and in need of permanent supportive housing. You could be a senior and need permanent supportive housing. So it really is the acuity level that you present at. And so when you think of 90 people in that high acuity, those are 90 spaces that are needed today. Mm-hmm. Today.
And so then also that would mean it doesn't depend on addiction or other things. It's a whole range of factors.
It is. Okay. It goes right across. When you are assessed coming into a housing situation, your highest acuity is where you typically would be in permanent supportive. The lowest would be in transitional housing, which is not really managed. Permanent supportive housing is exactly what it means. Permanent, supported. So you have permanent supports to keep you in a housing environment. And that is the most critical need that we're trying to address right now.
Okay, then maybe just tell us a little bit about the next steps in the grant process, how this is going to unfold.
Yeah, thank you for that. So administration are able now to file with their paperwork, for want of a better word, with the submission, a resolution by council that supports the issue going forward. So this is submitted into the accelerator fund, into the adjudicators, et cetera, and it follows that process. Again, I will say that this is the federal, and I commend the federal government for this. This program was designed towards municipalities to take it on, which means the municipality needs to have the resources, both human resources, relational resources in the community and so on, that it can successfully deliver an RFP program across the community. Some municipalities are not. And again, I mentioned, that we had the report that we commissioned in 2019. Without that report, I don't think our application would get the weight that it does. The federal government can see that Red Deer did an exhaustive community consultation on housing, came up with this report, and is able to address the needs factually with research and so on. So again, I'll say I'm optimistic, Paul. I'm optimistic. We need it.
Okay.
We need it.
So we're going to speed right along in our interview here and talk about traffic bylaws.
God bless the traffic bylaws. Yesterday, I'm happy to say, Paul, that this traffic bylaw, and I'll see if I can come to a conclusion here rather quickly but safely, as they say in traffic. So the traffic bylaw was really nothing more, yesterday's traffic bylaw, was really nothing more than adjusting to our new pay station, our parking, our new automated parking system. So anytime you bring in a technology change or an enforcement change or whatever, it affects certain wording, certain paragraphs, all those things. So that's what is now being amended. So the system's called hotspot parking. The city's been promoting it now for a few weeks, and so the traffic bylaw amendment that came yesterday will enable us now to administer it from a policy perspective. So nothing exciting in traffic, you know, we didn't take down some traffic lights or put up some new ones or paint lines or any
So not really
exciting
so much about traffic so much as it is about parking.
Very much.
Our most contentious subject
It is.
right after potholes in the city, right?
It is. And depending on the season, of course, people tend to react to, you know, snow and ice is also quite a hot button, or can be a hot button for people.
Maybe you could help us understand a little bit about how it will look for those people that do not like to use their cell phones for digital technology.
Right.
I know there's pay stations, but also maybe where people could find free parking when they're coming particularly to the downtown.
You know, it's a great question. You mentioned pay stations and so on, and those are delayed now. I mean, supply chain issues still linger, and certainly depending on the commodity you're looking for. So those pay stations we expect we'll have by the middle of October, we've been told. And I could be wrong, Paul, on this, but I think there are 14 or 18 pay stations that we are going to be putting up around the city so that people still have that option. You know, parking is
To pay by coin, you mean?
correct. That's correct. And you know, I had a citizen ask me about, you know, Mayor, why did you change to the automated system? You know, and so on. And then, you know, it's multifaceted, the reasons, but it is really highly convenient. You can change your time on your parking meter. You can accumulate a credit towards parking. You can do all kinds of great things in an automated system. From a city system, from an administrative perspective, and you know, the old banker in me is coming out a little bit here, but the maintenance of coin, the coin is an extraordinarily expensive commodity to deal with. Banks typically don't like it anymore. You know, we've changed our systems. Now, you know, for example, riding transit, you know, which was a coin or heavily coined operation, and so on. Coin is heavy, it's cumbersome, it needs to be rolled. It takes one or two people to wheel it around, and all those things. And all of those things lead to cost. And so a part of the parking system is certainly far, far more convenient, but it's also far more efficient now from an administrative perspective. So there's still options for people. You mentioned no-cost parking, coming into the downtown on weekends, parking, getting your steps in. I've often said to Red Deerians, God bless them all, you know, don't let 500 meters, make an adventure. 500 meters, you're going to do okay. You're okay. Walk a few blocks. It's all good.
Talk about it in time rather than meters, because it's really 30 seconds, 40 seconds to walk that far. Easier than thinking in meters. Hey, but maybe I'm going to just throw this idea out for you, and maybe you can just take it back to council, about offering some free parking to shoppers in the parkade. Because we do often get comments in the downtown. Retailers talk about it all the time when they see how many empty stalls there are in that parkade, and they realize their tax dollars have paid for it for 2 decades. They think, couldn't you just, you know, put some kind of system in so shoppers could park there?
You know, thank you for that, Paul. I will say I haven't heard that to any extent from people.
Well, now that it's on Shaw, you might.
A great point. And now that you've brought it up to me, I will see that through for sure.
Let's go on to the next topic, and that is the council's code of conduct bylaw. You've made some changes to that.
Yes, we did.
Can you talk about why you've made those changes and what you hope to affect with those changes?
You know, thank you. The code was brought in 2018 in response to the province of Alberta asking all municipalities to bring in a code of conduct. And the goal, of course, of the code was to keep the bar high for public life, to be transparent in what we're doing, and those kinds of things. We've had 4 codes under the existing bylaw, and the main challenge, and I felt this personally when I was elected mayor, the main challenge with the existing bylaw was that the mayor was the conduit for the codes. And that's okay, you accept that as part of the job and all those kinds of things. But the perception or the optics were poor, or are, well, I'll say were, because we've adopted a new bylaw. So what you had was the mayor accepting codes, and then pulling together a review team comprised of councillors to determine if the code had weight or not, credibility or not, that kind of thing. So under the new bylaw, we wanted to address and depoliticize, if you will, the risk of political interference in what should be an accessible way for the public to address the issue. So the first thing we did was to bring an integrity commissioner to the table and make that the change. So the mayor is no longer the conduit of the code. So we have an integrity commission now, which typically is an impartial, I will say arguably legal professional, although we're going to RFP the process and see what that looks like. So the ability then for the integrity commissioner and the ethics commissioner, it's going to be sort of a dual role. So on one hand, the ethics commissioner is going to be able to give advice to councillors who may be unclear or uncertain as to what is in proper decorum for a councillor, be it conflict of interest or behavior or social media, those kinds of things. And then the ethics commissioner will investigate and determine if the complaint has merit. Another significant change is we now have an informal process of resolving the complaint, whereas we didn't before. So if a member of the public brings a complaint against a councillor or against the mayor, as the case may be, we have a process in place now where we can engage with that member of the public or encourage, for example, Councillor Brown, for example, to say, listen, would you please contact Mrs. Smith, as the case may be, and see if this couldn't be resolved. This looks like a plain and simple misunderstanding here, and so on. So, but once again, that would be the integrity commissioner getting involved there. So it is a code. I think that has a tremendous amount of improvement from 2018, and it also includes a 90-day halt or cessation of investigation prior to an election. So you don't get into, sort of election game playing. I wish we wouldn't play games with elections, Paul, but it shouldn't shock you that that occurs from time to time. But the 90-day window at least enables us to say, this investigation will not occur until after the election, if the person is even re-elected, or it'll come to a stop because we are now in election season. So lots of improvements there. They were designed to heighten and elevate public confidence and certainly not take anything away. But I can tell you, I feel better as mayor, and I know council feels better as council, that we're not adjudicating our own in a situation like this.
That makes a lot of sense. And you certainly have seen issues right across the country in other municipalities and in our own that maybe haven't hit the news to the degree that, say, Toronto or Winnipeg or some of the other ones have.
Yes.
So this would really tighten up really the ethics of becoming an elected official and then how you would work together and how you address public complaints and internal.
Yeah, I think that's very well put. The public deserves the highest standards of behavior that a public servant can have, because there's a tremendous amount of trust conveyed in a ballot. I always say that a ballot is is really an endorsement of trust in someone. And so, but just as the public is entitled to that degree of trust, the elected official is also entitled to fairness, to equity, to be non-intimidated, non-bullied, non-coerced, and so on, which I really think the Integrity Commissioner and the Ethics Commissioner will do.
That's lovely. So I've got two things to wrap up with. Number one on my list is, I know you probably are familiar with our famous Canadian author, Leslie Greentree.
Yes.
So
yes, I am.
she's got her new book out very recently, and she's launching her website this weekend, so you can sign up for her newsletter. And I wanted to tell you that, so people could go to lesliegreentree.ca to do that. And of course, she'll love to hear that you're part of that whole thing, right?
You know, Paul, I'm hoping that whatever this advertisement cost you, that you've paid for it up front. But I
just
will.
supporting a
I will.
good
I
rapier
you know I know we're having fun here, but you know I've known Leslie for a lot of years, and it's very exciting that she's able to do this. I will say, Paul, and I'll recognize your own contribution to how you promote our local artists and have done so for years. We have an incredible array of artists in this city. They're just incredible people. Suzanne Hermery and her group does amazing work. Nigel Lane does amazing work. You know, Richard Bone and you know, the symphony people do a terrific work. You know, it's Jim Bisigo is another one, just amazing. And so we have much to be thankful for. And so I say congratulations, Leslie, and welcome.
And of course, we shouldn't really forget the amount of work the city has done promoting culture, winning the Cultural Capital of Canada Award years ago, the murals, the cityscapes that have been worked on. There's so many things that the city has done to promote culture. This, you know, the individual accomplishments of writers is, of course, important, but the contribution you make to the fabric of the community is really important.
You know, I feel that you got me on a track now. You got me on a bit of an orbit here, and I'll say a tip of the hat to my own brother. God bless him. He's as eccentric as I love him. But
that's
as
good. That's good news.
Anyway, God bless him. So Wayne just won the Stephen Leacock Award. You know, for humor, just a week ago, and all that kind of stuff. And I don't want to, you know, pound his drum too loudly, except I'm very proud of him, and he's become one of Canada's most respected writers. You know, so I say God bless him. I'm really working for a living. He's not. I'll say that.
Clearly, you haven't written a novel yet. Final questions then for you are this, easy ones for you. Maybe you could just tell us about some of the things of the last council meeting that we may not have talked about that you think are important. Maybe a funny moment, or a boring moment, or something that's exciting. Like, just let us know what it was.
Well, you know, well, I'm really proud of this council team, Paul. You know, we have navigated some choppy water, you know, since being elected. You know, and really, which started, you know, we were elected in a time where COVID was still quite an issue, and so forth. And we've navigated again a couple of codes of conduct and all those things, and so on. So I'm just so proud of them that they've been able to really now understand that it takes 9 people, 9 wills, 9 discourses, nine perspectives, and so on, to come into one common focus. I know that maybe that's not as funny as, or you're looking, you know, for something anecdotally, but I will say, when Councillor Dirksen will take 16 dunks in a dunk tank to promote a cause, that's pretty special. And when Councillor Broome will go out and throw horseshoes to open a community event, and Councillor Barnstable will go out and walk in a kidney walk, and all of those things, and You know, our council was all over this city in the past weekend. Recovery Day, Customer Appreciation Days, cutting ribbons, all those kinds of things. You know, we need to feel, or we should feel, I'll say, very, very proud, not as councillors per se, but as Red Deerians for what we have in this city, the quality of life we have in this city, what we're able to offer. And often we don't see it until we spend a week in another place and then come back to Red Deer and say, wow, this is pretty cool, you know. So we have a great council team. My credit to the public for saying, hey, you got it right in October of 2021.
Thank you.
Well, I think we're at the end. So, my great Red Deerians, you know, if you have an opportunity, and I mean this, get on down to Sunworks and meet Paul, talk to some of the staff. I know my wife is down here. I think she's a shareholder now. I'm not sure, but she's getting there, and that kind of thing. But you know, it's just a great place to come down and relax, have coffee, do some shopping, buy a very unique gift, some great books, all those things. You know, until next time, 2 weeks' time, hang in there, continue to build your community. Talk to your neighbor, make a friend with a neighbor on each side of you, and enjoy this great city we call Red Deer. Catch you soon.